Hey, what's up, lightboltjoe here. Today we're going to discuss the 1995 textbook by Gregory Maguire, Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West. Oh, I don't have my book cover on it. Pretend I have a book cover on it. Wicked, Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West by Gregory Maguire. 406 pages plus like a short story of Gregory playing with his friends and like how the idea of Wicked came about. So the main character, the Wicked Witch of the West, was originally created by L. Frank Baum in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. L. Frank Baum, we discussed in a plethora of reviews on his 14 Oz books, how he was a known racist and championed the extermination of Native Americans for the manifest destiny. And I not many people know that, and it still irks me that not many people know that, and it irks me that this wonderful world that was created by this awful person, it's a conflict. We've discussed this kind of conflict in regards to what we're supposed to do with this information, in regards to Jeepers Creepers. We had a whole conversation on that. It's just a weird, how am I supposed to feel about the world created by a monster? The monster created a wonderful world. It's a weird thing. So, the word Elphaba, right? Elphaba, Elphaba, is the name of the Wicked Witch of the West. Elphaba is derived from the initials of L. Frank Baum, the creator of Wonderful Wizard of Oz. LFB, Elphaba. That's how Gregory came up with the word Elphaba. There's your fun fact. Now, in the book, it explains that she's named after Saint Elphaba, Aelphaba, Fabula for short, who is the saint of waterfalls. And she is born in Munchkin Land, in the land of Oz. She is green. Nobody understands why. But then things are explained that there was a green elixir involved in some random orgy fest that her mother was partaking in. And she has this nanny, this au pair, named Nanny, throughout the entirety of the book. This book is the life and times of the Wicked Witch of the West. We are at the Wicked Witch of the West's birth, talking about gender throughout. This is very, very political, very religious, or lack thereof, atheistic as well. We're talking about Saint Lorraine. Lorraine-mas is a thing, which is Oz's version of Christmas, which is just wonderful to actually discuss. Certain nods to L. Frank Baum's 14 books and land thus created. Awesome. And if you haven't read those books, you don't really understand certain references. But I love those references because I love the land. Hate the monster, love the land. So, continuing on, at the end of the book, Elphaba announces that she's 38 years old. I'm old and blah, 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 this and that. So that's the timeline. This 406 pages glosses over certain decades, but we have from her birth to her death at the age of 38. The story of Wicked is 38 years worth of time. And it's pretty impressive when you watch then the Broadway musical, how they condensed certain things and how they changed a lot too, because the book is extremely different. Same general aspects, but there's the tighter bonds that Glinda and Elphaba have in the show versus the book. There's a lot of her going to a monastery in the book. There's a lot of her having a random kid named Lear all of a sudden, and she has no memory of. Turns out it's Fiyera's love child with her. Fiyera's married with three kids. She's having an affair with him. Her mom and her dad are both having the same affair with this quadling named Turtleheart. It's just wild. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll throughout this entire thing. Murder, torture, bestiality. It's just a wild book. I read this for the first time when I was 13. In 2003, I wanted to read the book before my family and I went to see the show when it opened in 2003. I am one of the few people who got to see Idina Menzel and Kirsten Chenoweth as Elphaba and Glinda on Broadway. And it's pretty cool knowing that. It was a wonderful experience, seeing it with my family. The four of us were sitting there, could not believe how incredible it was. It was just, I've never heard so much uproar of cheering at the end of a show before. Everybody was on their feet. We were stomping. We were clapping. We could not believe the show that we saw. It's one of the best shows ever, and that's why it's still going strong 21 years later. Now, I wanted to read the book just to understand, how much of the show is relevant to the book, all these things. The time dragon is a big centerpiece in regards to the stage, which is pretty cool. There's a lot of prophecy within the book. There's a lot of prophecy within the show. So certain things are there. But a thing that I hate about the show is that they make Bach, who's a wonderful character, the Tin Woodman. It's like, no, 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 no. The Tin Woodman is Nick Chopper in L. Frank Baum's 14 books. And we get a whole backstory of Nick Chopper. We get various... Nick Chopper had different body parts at one point. We meet his, body part brother, if you will. And, wild, right? Wild, wild, wild. Wizard of Oz, the Land of Oz books are horror, for sure. This book is horror, for sure. And so, having Nick Chopper as a named character in this book, having his axe be enchanted, a la the books, I was very happy to see that again. And I haven't read this in 21 years since the show came out. So here we are all these years later, 21 years later. I'm going back to it because I wanted to catch myself up before the movie. I'm very curious about this movie. I'm curious about the story of this movie because the Broadway show is 3 hours long or something like that. And then this movie is 2 hours and 40 minutes long. But this movie is just Act 1. So I'm very curious what they're adding in regards to what of the book they're going to be adding. Are they adding other characters? Are we getting Amma Clutch? Are we getting Nanny? Are we going to get the actual murder of Miss Marble in the second act? I'm very curious about certain things, and I loved how quick they glossed over the wizard being her father at the end of this book. I don't like the ending of this book because it retcons how the Wicked Witch of the West and Dorothy's interaction goes prior to her dying. From my understanding, the book has the 4 main characters, Dorothy, Tin Woodman, Lion, and Scarecrow, in the castle in Winky, at the Wicked Witch of the West's castle, where she lights the Scarecrow on fire, or lights the broom on fire, taunts the Scarecrow, and then Dorothy uses the bucket of water to exterminate the flame, inadvertently killing the witch. In the show, they kind of muddle to that. In the 1939 film, which everybody knows and loves, they definitely have that, but there's no Winky guards in this, and I can't remember, to be completely honest, if there's Winky guards in the show. I know there's flying monkeys in the show, and I know there's flying monkeys in the books, both Alfred Baum books and this book, but I don't like the retconning of, yes, Dorothy and Lion were then brought to the Wicked Witch's castle, whose castle was actually Fiero's, technically, to which she inadvertently stole from his wife and children and sister-in-laws when the Emerald City guards came to literally arrest them all, and she happened to not be there. It was another whole wild thing. But there was a sit-down dinner and conversations happened. I'm like, didn't happen unless you're retconning it, / unless you're adding a behind the scenes, this was actually another scene that wasn't actually a part of it. Fine. I love how Nick Chopper is in this book. I hate how Bach is Nick Chopper in the show. I don't like that sit-down dinner at the end of this book. I like how fast-paced the end of the show is. So there's plus and minuses in regards to the book and the show. And I'm very curious in regards to how the hell this movie is going to come out. This book is a hard R. Bro, when I tell you sex, drugs, and rock and roll on all fronts, this is a hard rated R book. I am very curious what they deduced to get a PG rated film on a show which is PG-13. Broadway show, musical. So you go from R to PG-13 to PG. What is going to happen? I'm very excited. I'm excited to see the practical sets. I'm excited to see the main cast. Everybody is incredible with what they do, with little clips and snips that we've heard of music and stuff. Cannot wait. Wonderful. I have the toys, some of the toys. I'm waiting on my Fiero figure. Cannot wait. The other thing is, Fiero's a prince, and I don't remember if they reference him as a prince in the show, because that's another big thing. He is a prince. That's why his family is also targeted. That way there is no more succession to the throne. Elphaba herself is an eminent Throp, third descent, which is royalty in Munchkin Land. give or take. So she is also royalty, but that's not really gone about. She's not referenced as a princess. There's that whole viral, meme argument of the two guys arguing if Glinda is a princess because she has a crown. And I'm like, bro, read the books. Glinda is not a princess. She's a societal lead of high society, but she is not a princess. Fiyero is a prince, named a prince. Elphaba's kind of a princess-ish. Another thing, which I find interesting, is in the book, Nessarose, Elphaba's younger sister, has no arms, and the magic shoes, the magic silver slippers, which then Dorothy then takes off after her corpse, is still warm in Munchkinland when the house falls on her. Whole nother story, obviously. So to have her not have arms in this, and to just put her in a wheelchair in the show was a very interesting decision, and I want to know how that conversation went originally back in 2001, whenever they were starting to plan out the show. I want to know how that conversation went in regards to just making her be wheelchair bound instead of finding an actress who didn't have arms, something to that extent. Like, how does that work, right? Very curious, because the film Nessarose is the same type of Nessarose in the show, whereas the silver slippers that their dad actually made with the knowledge that Turtle Heart had given him because he was a glassblower. Cool in a sentimental front. But she is in a chair in the show and she's in a chair in the film. So I'm curious how that works. They also have a younger brother named Shell. Will Shell be a part of this film? There are so many things I'm very curious about this film, and I'm going to be reading the other 3 books, Son of a Witch, Lion Amongst Men, and Out of Oz. I think that's 2, 3, and 4. From Greg McGuire. He has 4 books in the Wicked years, if you will. So I'm going to see if I can finish them all before the film. We'll see, because I'm going to be seeing this in theaters. I don't see many films in theaters anymore, but I definitely will be seeing this in theaters. I'm curious. I'm very curious. It's wild that I read this book originally at 13, but something I want to point out. I was very concerned when we were talking about Fury of the Dragon Goddess by Sarwa Chada, because it took me 2 months. It took me 2 months to read that book because my attention span was just gone. And I had a theory and I wanted to try out an audiobook next in my line of TBR, my to be read list. And I did the audiobook of Wicked in 12 days. As I should have done originally, just by reading it. So, now that I know I'm okay and I can pay attention and there's less distractions then, by listening to somebody read it to me as I'm then reading it with them, or if I'm doing laundry or cooking or whatever, cleaning as I'm listening to the book, it's beneficial as well because I'm getting the images faster in my mind because I'm not being distracted by anything else if I'm trying to read it. It's a focus thing. So I found, if I did this, I did 406 pages in 12 days. That's pretty cool from my perspective of the book before this. It took me 2 months to read 375 pages. So we're learning. We're getting there. We're going to see how fast we can get through Son of a Witch, which is shorter than this book. Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, culminating 38 years worth of her life. Very interesting. Very interesting. On to the next review. Mucho mahalo.